So we're talking about lesser contingencies in the contract to purchase. This is specific to Cincy MLS, Greater Cincinnati. So just keep that in mind when you watch, because if you're in another state or another MLS, things may be slightly different. So part two, we're talking about utilities. Utilities are so important. It is a contingency in our contract that the utilities are expected to be on through closing. They are. I have a lot of people who kind of forget, or they're not 100% sure how long those utilities need to be on, but they need to be on through closing per our Cincy MLS contract, our board contract, unless otherwise negotiated, because we have to remember there are some properties that don't have utilities on. They're being sold as is, and they will not have utilities on at all. So those are usually cash purchases, because most lenders, if you're financing through traditional means, do expect utilities to be on for appraisal. Sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes they cannot be activated, and that should be clearly written in the contract that utilities will not be on during the process. But if that is not the case, then sellers, you got to make sure that those utilities stay on through closing, so that the buyers, when they get to the walkthrough, they're not without power or water. We do a lot of rehabs, and we have a lot of rehab property that we sell once the houses are turned. And I would never dream as a seller of cutting utilities off to a property that I own prior to the new buyer owning. You don't want the house to be dead. Too many things can happen if it gets too hot or too cold. When you crank those utilities back on, you don't want anything happening to that house. So just make sure, sellers, that you're leaving those utilities on through closing. There are a lot of conscientious sellers who might have the final read done maybe the day after closing or something like that, just to be sure, because they love their property and they don't want anything to happen to it. So just keep that in mind, that unless otherwise negotiated in our contract, you need to leave those utilities on. Just because you move to the next place prior to closing doesn't mean that you have a right to cut those off unless you've negotiated that with the buyer. So if you have questions about this topic or any other real estate related topic, feel free to reach out to me by phone, text, email, or private message. And if you're watching on YouTube, click subscribe. Thanks, bye.